Star Trek has never been shy of a euphemism or two over the years. Thousands dead? Oh, you must mean the Tomed incident. Started an 18-year war between the Klingons and the Cardassians? Ah, you must mean the Betreka Nebula incident. Within those briefest but boldest of understatements lies an unknown period of Star Trek history referred to as the Lost Era. The Lost Era was defined in 2003 by editor Marco Palmieri. In Star Trek Voyages of Imagination, the Star Trek fiction companion, Palmieri delimited its timeline as follows. The era is framed by two key historical moments: Kirk's presumed death aboard the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations, the latest filmed moment of the 23rd century, and the beginning of the Next Generation's encounter at Farpoint, the first filmed moment of the 24th century. Each Lost Era novel comes with its own historian's note, to let the reader, and the writer presumably, know where in the Lost Era it features, relative to the presumed death of James T. Kirk. The novel series Star Trek Terok Nor expands the Lost Era to include the entirety of the occupation of Bajor that ended in 2369. Ultimately, the Lost Era got its name because it's lived up to it. For the longest time, Trek never visited this time period, even though it would make indirect nods and references to it along the way. That does look like it's about to change, because recent reports for the Section 31 Long Trek show that the character Rachel Garrett will feature. Now, Rachel Garrett, you will remember, was the captain of the Enterprise C. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 things you need to know about the Lost Era. Number 10. And the rest isn't history. The moments just before the Dom Perignon would christen the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations would be some of the last we would spend in what became a massive gap in Star Trek history, 2293 to 2364. Finding and putting dates on Star Trek's future timeline is complicated, or at least has been. The original series, on its own, left when it was set in a certain ambiguity. In his original 1964 pitch for Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry said that it might be set in the future. It could be 1995 or 2995. Later in the book The Making of Star Trek, Roddenberry added, "In the beginning, I invented the term star date simply to keep from typing ourselves down to 2265 AD, or should it be 2312 AD. I wanted us well in the future, but without arguing approximately which century this or that would have been invented or superseded." In The Making of Star Trek, it's assumed that the original series takes place in the 23rd century. Early reference works such as Star Trek Spaceflight Chronology from 1980 and Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise from 1987 assume that Kirk's 5-year journey takes place around the start of the 2200s. Then, the Star Trek The Next Generation writer and director's guide stated that Star Trek The Next Generation is dated near the beginning of the 24th century. 78 years have passed since the time of Kirk and Spock. Things are still a bit confusing in The Next Generation's first season. For example, Data says he graduated in the class of 78. Data gives us the first ever specific date in the Star Trek universe. Ralph Offenhouse, what year is this? Data, by your calendar, 2364. It was this and a few other basic assumptions that allowed for the retro dating of Star Trek as we know it. Most notably by Denise and Michael Okuda in their 1993 book, Star Trek Chronology, The History of the Future. Number 9. The Harrying of Harriman. John Harriman was the fresh but scared face who was really only there to effectively lay out the red carpet for the 3 living legends and sort of accidentally responsible for the presumed death of one of those legends for at least a century. He was then forever stuck in his own temporal loop of a Tuesday when his name went down in history as the man who got James Kirk killed. Adding to that, we've not had so much as a comm call from Harriman since. In beta canon, Harriman's worst day ever really establishes the beginning of the Lost Era. In the Lost Era series of novels, particularly in Serpents Among the Ruins, Harriman is finally given a lot more fleshing out and a backstory. As the novel's author, David R. George, puts it in Star Trek Voyages of Imagination, Harriman was introduced in the film Generations as something less than the cool, capable captain we saw in Kirk. The question I felt I therefore had to answer was how such a man could have risen to a starship captaincy. Did he deserve it? Would he become a good captain? The answer is a resounding yes. Far from the uncertain commander that we saw in Generations, Harman would prove himself to be a brilliant tactician and thoroughly capable captain and later admiral. As the architect of the TOMED incident in 2311, he would do some harrying of his own, but that was just to prevent a war that was looming on the horizon. Number 8. The secrets that cloak themselves. Serpents Among the Ruins tells us the intricate story of the TOMED incident. The TOMED was the Romulan flagship under the command of the belligerent Admiral Aventir Vokar. Captain Harman, along with 2 other SI operatives, managed to hijack the TOMED. It was then used as a sort of false flag. They launched the ship at the Foxtrot sector of an asteroid base, destroying said base and several others, and killing thousands, or so they said. All of the TOMED incident deaths had in fact been manufactured in advance. Harman tried to get all of the Romulan crew off the ship first, but a few stubbornly remained, including Vokar. The Klingons then sided with the Federation, forcing the Romulans into a stalemate and then joining them at the peace talks at Algeron. In canon, all we know is that the Treaty of Algeron was signed in 2311. It redefined the borders of the neutral zone and forbade Starfleet from ever developing cloaking technology. In Serpents Among the Ruins, Harman concocted a failed trial of a new hyperwarp drive on the new starship Universe to lure the Romulans into thinking that the Federation was trialing new propulsion. This, the seed was planted, would be to do a sort of first strike against the Romulans using this new technology that would allow them to strike hard and deep into Romulan territory. In reality, this hyperdrive or hyperwarp drive was a combination of cloaking tech and the already failed transwarp drive. In fact, it was well documented that Starfleet had quite the aversion to cloaking technology regardless. During the Algeron negotiations, Starfleet and the Federation needed a bargaining chip to get something they wanted badly. This was the freedom of the Koltari, a pre-warp civilization that had been invaded and enslaved by the Romulans. To do so, they handed over the specs to this new hyperwarp drive. They gave it to the Romulans and the Klingons and then feigned frustration about having to give up their cloaking technology. All of this, Admiral Pressman was really barking up the wrong tree. Number 7. Hikaru in Excelsior. The subspace shockwave in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country was followed by thousands of letters from fans who were all crying out for the same thing. Give us a Sulu spin-off series. Shields! Shields! Throw Rhapsody on that. The series that was described by Grace Lee Whitney as George and Gracie on the Excelsior was actually given a bit of serious consideration by Paramount for some time. A little later, the episode Flashback was actually seen as a bit of a backdoor pilot for a potential Sulu spin-off. Whitney told StarTrek.com in 2011 that she pitched to producers, like, why don't you start this show and then just bring us on every 3 months or so? Evidently, the Excelsior series never came to be, and Whitney passed away in 2015. Now, as recently as 2022, George Takei has still expressed interest in doing this series. The first novel in the Lost Era series, The Sundered, focuses on Sulu and the Excelsior. The novel is primarily set in 2298, in which Sulu and the Excelsior are tasked with engaging in peace talks with Atholians, but along the way they discover a new enemy, the Nayal. We discovered that the Nayal are in fact a genetically engineered offshoot of humans. In 2155, they were thrown through an interspatial rift to the small Magellanic Cloud. This is a real dwarf galaxy situated about 200,000 light years away from the Milky Way. In The Sundered, the Excelsior crew, including Tuvok and Chekhov as well, pay a visit to this cloud via a spatial rift. I want you to keep that in mind as we go down through this list. Number 6. Lady in Red. I'm far more distracted by a different discovery. Giorgio is standing with a young Rachel Garrett, played by Casey Roll. That is how, in his article for Variety, Adam B. Very revealed to the masses that Rachel Garrett was going to be in the Section 31 long trek. It does say that Garrett is more of an Easter egg character than a massive part of the plot, but it does also mean that the Section 31 long trek is set in the Lost Era. Garrett and the Enterprise C also feature prominently in the Lost Era novels. The fourth book of the series, Well of Souls, set in 2336, is dedicated to them. Garrett also appeared in the previous installment alongside the likes of Colonel Worf and Curzon Dax. This book, The Art of the Impossible, is set between 2328 and 2346, up to and just beyond the Battle of Narendra III, which of course we remember from yesterday's Enterprise. Garrett died in an alternate version of 2366, as had most of her crew back in 2344. This actually helped to prevent a war between the Federation and the Klingons, although it did, through some timey-wimey stuff, lead to the creation of Sela, but that's another thing altogether. Number 5. Uhurian Legend. What was a good year for Bloodwine, according to Chief O'Brien, was a great year for Captain Uhura. In 2301, she and the crew of the USS Leon de Grance, a Lancelot-class ship, naturally, set off on a 5-year mission to explore the Lesser Magellanic Cloud. That, according to a blurry plaque seen in the Star Trek Picard episode The Stargazer, and then later tweeted out in slightly higher definition by Dave Blass. If we assume they meant smaller and not lesser, that raises a few eyebrows. How exactly did the Leon de Grance travel such vast distances in such a small amount of time? Saying that, travelling to the cloud in beta canon is almost common. As we know, Sulu and crew did it, and so did the Titan and Riker, both of whom did this via a spatial rift. Is that how Captain Uhura took the Leon de Grance there? The plaque from Picard further states that the Leon de Grance was in service from 2288 to 2366. Now, we know Uhura wasn't captain for all of this time. I mean, she was still serving as communications officer aboard the Enterprise A in 2293. The plaque goes on to state, the Leon de Grance became an Academy training vessel in 2317, with Captain Uhura remaining in command until her retirement in 2333. Countless Academy cadets experienced faster-than-light travel for the first time aboard the Leon de Grance, which is now on permanent display in the Fleet Museum. Wonderful as that is, that canon information contradicts something in the Lost Era series. The 6th book, Catalyst of Sorrows, shows Uhura as an admiral and chief of Starfleet Intelligence in 2360. Number 4. Picard and other maneuvers. The USS Leon de Grance was deliberately named and created by John Eves as a nod to Patrick Stewart's role in the film Excalibur. It was so named on the Speed of Light Club certificate that we see in the Starfleet archives in the episode Remembrance. It read that on the 4th of April 2327, aboard the USS Leon de Grance, Cadet Jean-Luc Picard flew 300,000 kilometers per second, thus qualifying as a member of the Speed of Light Club. In fact, according to Picard co-creator and writer Kristen Beyer in a 2020 interview with TrekCulture, the writers and producers, while coming up with the idea for short treks, had wanted to include a story where a young Picard meets none other than Uhura. In that TrekCulture piece, Alex Kurtzman further stated that the original idea was that a very young Picard would go to Uhura, who would assign him a mission that would have something to do with the Borg. Go figure. As for the actual Picard maneuver, there's an entire series of Stargazer novels out there. Riker actually got his own Lost Era novel as well, Deny Thy Father. In this, we see him go from cadet to serving aboard the Pegasus. Number 3. Nests of Vipers. Tracor's third prophecy might have been misinterpreted and misapplied, but Nests of Vipers was a pretty good description for Terok Nor during the occupation of Bajor. The exact length of the Cardassian subjugation of Bajor is a little bit up for interpretation, but general consensus puts it at 50 years, 2319 to 2369. We saw the immediate aftermath of the occupation in, of course, the first season of DS9, but we've never seen the initial invasion or much of the occupation itself outside of a few flashbacks. Well, there was that one time that Kira went back in time using an orb, but, in broad strokes. By its own description of a 3-book saga of Star Trek's Lost Era, the first of which is titled Day of the Vipers. The 2008 Star Trek Terok Nor series is notable for its detailed exploration of the occupation. This from the arrival of the Cardassians in 2319 to their departure from Bajor in 2369, thus redefining where the Lost Era technically ends in terms of history. Now, if that weren't enough to consider, there's also the Setlik III massacre, the Betreka Nebula incident, and of course the Federation Cardassian Wars. The Cardassians were pointedly Viper-like from the get-go. Michael Westmore was inspired by reptilian designs when coming up with the makeup. He designed this new species to have a menacing, serpent, almost King Cobra-like look, as he explained in the Star Trek The Next Generation 365. Through little more than a couple of lines of dialogue between Garak and Bashir in The Way of the Warrior, the Betreka Nebula incident kick-started an 18-year conflict between the Cardassians and the Klingons. It also formed the basis of the Lost Era novel, The Art of the Impossible. Number 2. Data's lore. When everyone thinks Data exploded in The Most Toys, Geordi and Wesley start going through Data's belongings to pack them up. They discover a selection of medals that, as Wesley puts it, are some of Starfleet's highest honours. And what's truly remarkable is that Data must have achieved these medals before his service on the Enterprise D. Data was activated on the 2nd of February 2338, according to his personnel file in the episode Conundrum. Lore came first, but not before B4. One of his brothers failed most evilly, while the other lacked positronic complexity. Data just needed to mind his P's and Q's and put some flippin' clothes on. He was deliberately left behind after the crystalline entity attacked the colony. Data was found by crew members from the USS Tripoli in 2338, and he joined Starfleet Academy in 2341. After graduation, he was assigned to the USS Trieste and managed to achieve the rank of Lieutenant Commander in less than 20 years. Now that's all canon-ish. The Star Trek The Next Generation novel, The Buried Age, which describes itself on the front cover as a tale of the lost era, depicts the first meeting between a Captain Picard, no longer of the Stargazer, and Data in 2360. Number 1. Lost and Found. Star Trek abhors a vacuum, and the Lost Era novels have done a brilliant job in filling that void. Before Star Trek Section 31 even hits screens, it's hinted that we might be getting ready for more. In that same Variety article, Adam B. Very writes, "Should Section 31 prove successful, Yo says she's game for a sequel, and Alex Kurtzman is already eyeing more opportunities for TV movies." What else would you like to see from a Lost Era tie-in? We don't know much about Section 31 from this era, but you pick any of the incidents on this list, you can bet your arse that they were up to their black-collared necks in it. In Star Trek Voyages of Imagination, The Lost Era, editor Marco Palmieri states, "If I have any regrets about The Lost Era, it's that there was less thematic variety among the stories than I was hoping for. I realised that most of the things that had been established about those years were military in nature, wars, battles, etc. We knew far less about discoveries, first contacts, scientific breakthroughs, etc. It's certainly true that there's so much history in this era that in this list we've not been able to cover a lot of birthdays, a lot of first meetings, a lot of first contacts, and of course that ship that just skipped it all. Looking at you, the bosun. For example, when did Starfleet the Federation go from food synthesizers to replicators? When was the invention of the holodeck as we understood it in The Next Generation? So many questions, so many more. We're not going to get all of the answers to all of our questions in this one TV movie, but including Rachel Garrett in it finally at least lets us know that there is interest there behind the scenes to explore this lost era of Trek history. In all that, and with all of the Lost Era novels that cover the history between 2293 and 2364, there's a lot of material there, and quite frankly, we might have to start coming up with a new name for it. That's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much for watching along. Thank you so much, Jack Kiley, for writing the article upon which this video is based. Make sure you go check that out over on whatculture.com. You've been awesome and you've been wonderful. Are you hungry for Lost Era? I know I am. I really want to see more material covering this era of Star Trek. Please make sure that you're subscribed. Thank you so much, everyone who does. Thank you so much if you're doing it right now. We really appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, go on, hit the button. All the cool kids do it. You can follow us on the various socials at TrekCulture. I'm at Sean Ferrick on the various socials as well. Until I see you again, make sure that you live long and prosper, look after yourself, be kind to yourself, and we will see you soon, my friends. Thank you so much.